There's a reason why people are so attached, and it's not just visual effects. It's not just spectacle. There's something so deep in story. Please, in your opinion, what made Marvel work as opposed to DC? And then I'll give you my humble opinion as well.
Okay. Well, as you mentioned, this is definitely riddled with landmines, and so I'm going to do my best here to not step on one.
A lot of hate mail is a lot of hate email is coming. I can see it already.
Right. I think there's a couple of things. One, I do think the point that you make about Marvel really built their recent success on characters that were not their A-list characters. I think that has a great deal to do with it, actually, because expectations for Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, the expectations for those characters, the backstory, the mythology behind those characters is so ingrained in the audience's mind. We have such a strong psychological idea of what those characters do and what types of stories they can be involved in. It makes it like walking a tightrope trying to tell especially stories on the big screen about those characters. I think we've seen, the Batman universe and the Superman universe work really well, actually, in the television market. Smallville, I thought, was a really good show.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah. Wonderful. But with Marvel, you have basically the people who went in to see these Marvel films, for the most part, didn't have a lot of expectations, didn't have a lot of backstory or knowledge about how Iron Man became Iron Man, about anything more than the Hulk maybe used to be a scientist. Maybe they knew that, maybe they didn't. But for the most part, Marvel was able to build their current mythology around these characters from the ground up in the mind of the audiences. And I think that was a lot easier task to pull off than what DC faced. Also, the nature of DC characters versus Marvel characters from a storytelling perspective is challenging, because basically with DC characters, and this is not all of them, but for the most part, DC characters are born with the gift, right? They're born with the supernatural power. Superman, he's born with it. Wonder Woman, she's born with it. Green Lantern, born with it. Marvel characters, for the most part, receive the gift through some sort of mistaken technology. They usually, are regular people that are endowed with this gift, and it usually involves some sort of diabolical thing that happens with technology. I think that idea of our technology being something that damages us, that we have to then overcome, is something that really resonates with people psychologically in this day and age. We recognize that we're giving up something by giving away all our privacy and giving away all our time to our cell phones. These are things that we know we have great advantages for, but we also know we're giving up something, but we'd like to think we're still going to win in the end. And so I think the Marvel mythology really speaks to that and plays to that. That's just one guy's humble opinion. Please don't at me on Twitter about this. But that's one guy's opinion of why I think we may have seen a lot more success, at least in the cinematic universe, with Marvel.
Now, would you agree that, and this has been my theory about this, and we won't go on this for another hour, I promise. But I've always felt that DC's characters are all essentially gods. They're all godlike in their own way. So Green Lantern is essentially a god in his powers. So is Wonder Woman. So is Superman. So is Martian Manhunter. Other than Batman, who I've always argued to state that is a Marvel character in the DC universe, because he was a normal guy that got endowed by the technology and had to deal with his stuff. As Thor is a god, but a very non-godlike God. Like, he has weaknesses. These other ones, they're just so hard to write for. Like, I remember watching a documentary on Superman, and they were like, yeah, we get to a point where Superman blew out a star with his breath. Like, where do you go from that? You know, like there's nothing like on a just narrative standpoint. Where's the conflict? It's harder to write for those characters. Would you agree?
I would completely agree. It's tough when we're dealing with gods. This is why, by the way, in mythology, when the Greek gods, were created by the Greeks to tell, they told stories about them. They are all really imperfect gods. That's the reason their stories that have endured forever is actually they're projections of human beings on different aspects of who we are. Mm-hmm. The Greek gods are more like human beings than the humans in the Greek mythological stories. And so I think that's one reason I think also people have gravitated towards Marvel in this day and age with the films has been Iron Man seems more like a guy you'd like to go get a beer with than Superman or Batman. They seem more like us, seem more relatable. They're not so much the projections of who we want to be on our best days like Batman and Superman. So
that's interesting.
And that said, I love Batman and Superman. I actually prefer the DC characters more than the Marvel characters, but there's no denying the success that Marvel has had at the box office.
And I would agree with you. Like, I would not want to have a beer with Batman, but I would definitely want to have a beer with Tony Stark. Like, there's just no, Batman's going to be brooding about things. He's just an angry dude. But I'm a huge Batman fan. That's why I love what Nolan did with Batman and Dark Knight. Arguably the best superhero movie ever made, in my opinion. With Logan coming up probably real close second, in my opinion. I mean, they're just at a different playing field. I enjoy the Avengers. I enjoy all those, but there's something really deep in those other movies.
For sure.
Yeah, it's a very interesting topic, and I'm sure we could have a whole episode on Marvel DC. And one last thing before I can finish on the Marvel DC thing, I just have to.
Okay.
In your opinion as well, do you believe that DC? I felt like DC was trying to mimic or copy or catch up with this kind of false race that they were with Marvel. Marvel had like a 5-year head start on them building this universe, and they're just trying to jam everything in. Where if they would have taken their time and done literally they could have done the blueprint. They could have literally stolen the blueprint from Marvel and just build it out little by little, then do the Justice League, then bring in maybe Suicide Squad. Then it was laid out for them, but they were just in such a rush.
Yeah.
Do you agree?
Yeah, I do. And I think this is actually just to loop it back into story. I think this is something that writers and storytellers really can learn a valuable lesson from, because many of us have a great idea for a story or a scene, and we're quick to sort of get that into our story, and then we get into like the second act or the third act, and we really sort of have our characters just sort of wandering around because we've done this big thing we wanted to do. And so I think there's always a temptation to not appropriately pace our storytelling. And I think that's what we saw with DC on a great level. And I think you and I would both also agree, as storytellers, pacing is hard to master. It's really difficult. In a story, pacing is one of the hardest things to do. And I think we even see, the big boys fail at this when they try sometimes because it's hard to do.
Yeah, there's no question. And I always tell people too, is like, just because you have $200 million doesn't mean you know what you're doing. It's like going up to the bat. Like, just because you're Babe Ruth doesn't mean you're gonna hit a home run every time.